Portugal doesn't have a long history of building supercars. That's just a fact, and it's not a criticism. Most countries don't. What makes the Adamastor Furia interesting isn't that it exists despite that history, but that it exists because of a very specific set of circumstances that came together in Porto over the past decade or so. This isn't a vanity project bankrolled by someone who wanted to put their country on the automotive map. It's the logical endpoint of a company that spent years getting very good at carbon fiber and composites, looked at what it could do with that expertise, and decided the answer was a hypercar. Adamastor was founded in Porto in 2010, and for a long time its identity was tied to supplying specialized components rather than building complete vehicles. That background matters more than it might seem. A lot of small manufacturers attempt ambitious cars and stumble because they underestimate how different it is to engineer a whole vehicle versus engineering individual parts. Adamastor came at it from the opposite direction. They already understood materials, structures, and the disciplines involved in high-performance construction before they ever committed to building something with 4 wheels and a number plate. The Furia is the result of that foundation being taken seriously. The powertrain choice is one of the more pragmatic decisions in recent hypercar history, and pragmatic isn't a word that gets used enough as a compliment. Rather than developing a bespoke engine, which is enormously expensive, time-consuming, and risky for a small manufacturer, Adamastor turned to Ford performance and sourced the 3.5-liter twin-turbocharged V6 from the Ford GT. It's a decision that makes complete sense once you stop expecting every hypercar startup to reinvent combustion from scratch. The Ford GT's engine is a genuinely excellent unit. In the Furia's configuration, it produces around 650 horsepower and approximately 571 newton-meters of torque, and it delivers that torque early in the rev range in a way that makes the car feel muscular and responsive rather than something you have to chase through the gears. Using a proven platform freed the team to concentrate their resources on the areas where they actually had unique expertise: the chassis, the aerodynamics, the structure. That's a smart allocation of effort. The numbers tell part of the story. 0 to 62 miles per hour in roughly 3.5 seconds. Top speed north of 186 miles per hour. On a straightforward reading of the spec sheet, those figures might not look extraordinary in a segment where some machines crack 200 miles per hour and reach 60 in under 2.5 seconds. But performance cars have never been purely about top-line specifications. And the Furia's case rests on something else: weight, or rather the deliberate absence of it. The car comes in somewhere between 1,050 and 1,100 kilograms. That's genuinely light. Most modern performance cars have been getting heavier as they've added more electronics, larger battery packs for hybrid systems, and increasingly complex drivetrain components. The Furia goes the other direction, and the power-to-weight ratio that results from pairing 650 horsepower with roughly a ton of car is what gives those acceleration numbers their real-world bite. On a track where cornering matters as much as straight-line speed, the weight advantage compounds in ways that raw horsepower figures don't capture. Carbon fiber is central to achieving that weight target, and this is where Adamastor's heritage becomes directly relevant. The Furia uses a monocoque chassis with integrated safety structures, and the bodywork is extensively carbon throughout. This isn't a company buying panels from a third-party supplier and hoping for the best. The composite manufacturing expertise is in-house, developed over years of working in motorsport-adjacent industries. That experience shows in how the material is applied, not just as a weight-saving measure, but as an integral part of the engineering philosophy. Every kilogram removed from the structure is a kilogram that doesn't need to be compensated for with more power, more brake cooling, or more aerodynamic grip. Keeping things light is almost always better than adding performance to overcome excess mass, and the Furia is built around that logic from the ground up. The aerodynamics are where things get particularly interesting. A lot of cars in this category generate downforce through large wings and aggressive bodywork. Effective, but it tends to create drag, and frankly, it tends to look like the car is trying to make a statement. The Furia takes a different approach, using a Venturi effect floor with dual air channels to generate ground effect. This is the same basic principle that Formula One cars exploited before regulations restricted it, and that the sport has recently returned to, the idea being that accelerating air underneath the car creates a low-pressure zone that sucks the car toward the road rather than pushing it down from above. At speed, the claimed downforce figures exceed 900 kilograms. That number deserves a moment of consideration. The car weighs between 1,050 and 1,100 kilograms, and at high speed it's generating almost as much downforce as it weighs. The implications for cornering grip and high-speed stability are significant, and they're being achieved with a setup that's aerodynamically efficient rather than just blunt. Mechanically, the Furia matches its aerodynamic ambition with race-derived hardware. A sequential transmission operated through steering wheel-mounted paddles handles gear changes, working alongside a limited slip differential that manages power delivery to the driven wheels. Braking comes from a high-performance setup with multi-piston calipers, the kind of system that can handle repeated hard stops without fading in the way that conventional brakes eventually do under track conditions. The suspension and tire combination are tuned to extract maximum grip while keeping the car's behavior predictable for a skilled driver. None of this is surprising for a car at this price point, but it all fits coherently together rather than feeling like individual performance upgrades bolted onto a less focused platform. One aspect of the Furia's character that distinguishes it from a lot of contemporary hypercars is the relatively minimal reliance on electronic driver aids. ABS and traction control are present, which is sensible from a safety standpoint, but the car doesn't lean on layers of intervention to manage its behavior the way that many modern performance machines do. This is a considered choice, as processing power has made it easier to implement sophisticated stability systems. A growing number of hypercars have effectively moved toward being very fast cars that computers help you drive. The Furia is aimed at something different. A driver who wants the electronic safety net to be there if needed but doesn't want it doing the driving. That kind of analog engagement is increasingly rare, which makes it increasingly valuable to the people who specifically seek it out. Testing at the Portimão circuit in Portugal has been encouraging. Engineers working with the prototype have reported stable high-speed behavior and consistent performance over the course of track sessions, and the data collected there has fed back into refining the car's setup. Portimão is a serious circuit, fast, technical, with significant elevation changes that test a car's aerodynamics and suspension in ways that a flat track wouldn't. Getting promising results there isn't a trivial achievement for a prototype, and it suggests the underlying engineering concept is sound rather than just theoretically coherent. Production will be limited to 60 units. Pricing starts at approximately 1.6 million euros before taxes. Both of those facts position the Furia squarely in the ultra-exclusive segment of the hypercar world, where the purchase decision is as much about rarity and craftsmanship as it is about performance metrics. At that price and in those numbers, Adamastor is explicitly placing the Furia in conversation with names like Pagani, Koenigsegg, and Rimac, brands that built their reputations over many years and multiple models. It's an ambitious target, but the company's pitch isn't purely about outperforming those cars on a track. It's about offering something different. A lighter, more analog, aerodynamically sophisticated machine that prioritizes how it feels to drive over how its specifications read in a comparison table. The broader context here is worth acknowledging. The hypercar segment has moved heavily toward hybridization and increasingly complex electronic systems over the past few years. There are very good reasons for that. Hybrid powertrains can deliver extraordinary performance figures, and electrification is where much of the industry's engineering investment is going. But there's a legitimate counter-argument that something has been lost in the process, that the cars being produced at the sharp end of the performance world have become more impressive and less involving. The Furia represents a bet that there are buyers who feel that way, that the market for a pure light analog hypercar remains real even as the mainstream pushes in a different direction. Whether that bet pays off depends on execution. Transitioning from a promising prototype with strong track results to a production-ready car that can be delivered to 60 customers and live up to the promises made is a substantial challenge. Small manufacturers have struggled with that transition before, sometimes badly, but Adamastor's background gives them a more credible foundation than many startups at a similar stage. They understand manufacturing, They understand composites, and they've demonstrated the discipline to make pragmatic engineering choices rather than chasing headlines at the expense of substance. What the Furia represents in the end is a specific kind of ambition, measured, focused, and rooted in genuine capability rather than aspiration alone. Portugal doesn't have a supercar tradition, but tradition isn't the only way to build something exceptional. Sometimes you just need the right expertise, the right philosophy, and enough patience to bring them together properly. The Furia looks, at this point, like it might be exactly that.